What's up everybody, Matt Moran here for another car review. This is of course the 2018 Alfa Romeo Stelvio. Huge thanks to Alfa Romeo for providing me with this very cool Stelvio to review for you guys today. So about the Stelvio, well this is the first SUV here for Alfa Romeo, their second offering in the United States, and it's a really good looking thing. This one is the Lusso trim, so it's not quite as sporty in its look compared to the sport trim that you usually can option on these as well. But anyway, right up front there, still looks very nice and aggressive. I love that Alfa Romeo grille and the intricate details it has there with the metal trim on it. It just looks really good too. I love the LED ring you have going around those headlights. Just really make them look aggressive and animal-like, I guess, in some ways, and just look really cool. And overall, it's just a really nice looking front end. Coming down to the sides here, you have these nice 19-inch wheels that still look very good. But then anyway, I just love the sloping roofline you have here, the Stelvio. And then going out to the back there, it also looks very nice. Again, very sporty. I like how, you know, the rear window is pretty aggressively raked, which does hurt visibility a little bit, but gives you some really great looks out back there. I like the taillights you have and some very aggressive exhaust tips as well that are very thick-walled and very large and just look really cool. And again, just round out this really nice and sporty looking exterior on the Stelvio. And overall, I think it really nicely differentiates itself from the competitors. It's not just another bland SUV in the luxury segment. It really is exciting looking, I think, from just about every angle. Whereas for the interior of the 2018 Alfa Romeo Stelvio, well, it's a pretty nice place to be. So anyway, first things first, sitting down in these seats. This is again the Lusso trim for the Alfas, and so the Lusso is always a little more luxurious, less sporty. So these seats are less sporty than what you could get if you got the sport trim. So you know, pretty flat bolstering here by the thighs, but torso support is still pretty good, not quite as aggressive as again the sport seats. And being an enthusiast, that would definitely be the package I would go for, not the Lusso trim here. But they are still comfortable seats. They're a little easier to get in and out of as well. You know, they're not quite as aggressive bolstering as the other seats. So you know, it just depends on your personal taste. But they are very comfortable seats. They're attractive. I love the embossed Alfa Romeo logo you have there in the headrest, and overall they're pretty nice seats. Next is the steering wheel in the Alfa Romeo Stelvio, which is still just as wonderful as it always is here in these Alfas. I love this new steering wheel they have. It has just a really nice 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches, just a little bit of a thinner wheel too. I just really appreciate the way that it feels. Has a little bit of a flat bottom here. You have your very cool engine start stop button right on the steering wheel here, and a fair assortment of buttons here, but not too many. But this one, again, being the Lusso trim, means you do not get the glorious huge metal paddle shifters, which is unfortunate because now the only way you can manually shift is with the little gear shifter here. But you know, again, if you're going for the Lusso trim, chances are you don't want to paddle shift and, you know, do your own aggressive sporty driving, so it's not a big deal. It does give you better access to the steering wheel stalks here, which is something that, you know, the paddles do block partially if you do get those large paddles, but it's not a big deal either way. But overall, like I said, still a really great wheel. Gauges are the same as you get in the Giulia, and just really great Alfa Romeo gauges. I really love them. You know, just nice, bold, large fonts that are very good looking. You have a little digital portion there in the middle, which doesn't do too much there. You know, it'll have your digital speedometer and a bunch of good basic information there right on the main screen. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, you have this very nice, large 8.8-inch display, widescreen, really a nice high-resolution display. It is not touchscreen, unfortunately. You do have a little controller down here, which feels a little cheap. It's a little wiggly. It has, you know, some rubber on it, but not, you know, the metal goodness that you find in a lot of other competitors out there. But you know, it does an okay job here. This infotainment system, it's basically very similar to like an iDrive system or something like that. But it's, again, you got to just scroll this wheel and click a bunch of times, and it's overly complicated to me. I really don't think it needs to be that hard. You know, I think a touchscreen interface, much like what all the other FCA products have, would be spectacular. But you know, I appreciate that this isn't FCA parts bin. Nothing in this interior is, by the way. And so it's very unique to Alfa, and it's, you know, it fits in with all the other European stuff. I'm just not crazy about any of the European stuff, to be honest. I just prefer a simple touchscreen. But anyway, it still does a pretty good job. Unfortunately, this one is a pretty early production one, so it does not have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. But for the later production 2018 Stelvios, they should have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto built into them already. But otherwise, like I said, it is very nice. You know, I really do like the 3D navigation maps, even if putting in an address is a little more work. You know, just looking at the map is nice. They're very cool, high resolution maps that look pretty nice. And overall, like I said, a pretty decent infotainment. Not the best out there, but certainly not the worst either. Coming down to the rest of the center area here, it's pretty simple and basic. You just have two vents there there. And then you have your little climate control knobs, which are, you know, nicely placed here, just a few buttons. And overall, just very simplified, nothing, not a sea of buttons. The only other buttons you have here are your DNA selector for your drive modes down here. Like I said, that little scroll wheel to control the infotainment, and then a volume and tune little knob there. And then you have a parking brake thing, and that's it. So overall, very simple and clean looking interior. Speaking of the way the interior looks though, it is fairly nice in a lot of places. You know, you have metal door handle pulls. You do have this trim which looks nice. It's wood looking trim. It has even a grain feel to it, like real wood, but it feels cheap, like it's just plastic. And so things like that, you know, there are some nice parts of this interior, but there is a good amount of cheap plastic. This one doesn't have the extra $1,000 leather package as well. So for example, on the Julia I reviewed, the tops of the dashboard were leather, the tops of the doors were leather. It was really nice and made it feel a lot classier and more upscale in here. This one does not have that option, and I think it's well worth $1,000, because otherwise you just have this cheaper feeling plastic. It still has a little bit of softness to it. It's not super hard or cheap feeling, but it just looks kind of cheap, and overall just kind of downgrades the look of this interior a little bit. So I would definitely recommend getting that leather package if that's something that, you know, you're into. But otherwise, you know, all the plastics and things feel pretty good. Again, I think they're all maybe just one step behind all the competitors as far as the German stuff goes. And so I think the interior isn't, you know, the most luxurious out of all its competitors, but it certainly makes up for that in the driving, which I'll get to in a minute. As far as storage space in the Stelvio, it's pretty good overall. So in the doors here, you have a large map pocket with a bottle holder, which is always good to have. Coming over to the center here, you have this little cover that slides forward, and then you have your two cup holders there. One thing I will say though about those two cup holders is that if you do want to have a drink in the second one here, then this power outlet gets blocked off a little bit. So depending on if you know, have some thing like a dash cam or something that runs through there, a radar detector where it's a bulky plug, it could block off one of your cup holders there a little bit. But just a little thing I've noticed in my week of driving it here. And then coming back to the center armrest, which is got some nice leather on it here, and not super soft, but does have a little bit of padding to it. And anyway, you open that up, and then you have a fairly decently sized cubby. It's got this little division in it, which kind of limits its usability, I think. But you know, it does have a little coin holder and things like that built into it. You'll also see a USB jack and auxiliary jack in there. But I just wish it didn't have that divider, because like things like a large sunglasses case are kind of a tight squeeze. And so it would be nice to just not have that divider and have that whole empty area there to do whatever you want with it. But anyway, still nice to have, and a good amount of storage. You can still, you know, fit a wallet, keys, all that kind of stuff, phone even in there, and so good to have all that. Backseat space in the Stelvio is decent. Again, I think it's maybe a little bit tighter than most of the competitors out there. I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself, I have probably about 2 inches to spare. That's about it. You know, compared to small SUVs, that's okay, but compared to like stuff like the GLC vehicles like that have a little bit more space, I think, in the back. So it's not best in class, I don't think, but it's certainly good enough, I think, you know, for most people. Unless, you know, everyone in your family is over 6 feet tall, then you're gonna have a squeeze back there, but then you should probably shop for something bigger anyway. Headroom though, you know, again, you have that sloping roofline, so it does limit a little bit, but I still have probably two inches or so of headroom to spare. So, you know, I'd say if you're 6 feet tall or something, that's probably the upper limit. Anyone beyond that, you'd either have to, you know, have the front passengers move up a little bit or something like that. But overall, it's a very nice back seat though. You know, it's got, you know, air vents back there, 2 USB jacks, you have a fold down center armrest with cup holders in it, and it's a comfortable back seat as well. And so overall, a very nice back seat, even if it is a little bit on the small side. Trunk space in the Stelvio is quite good. You know, you still have a lot of space there. It doesn't slope down too aggressively there for the lift back, so you have lots of space back there. You know, you have a little cubby there on the right hand side. You have a subwoofer as well, and you also have a power outlet, a normal standard house current power outlet in the back there, and you also have another cigarette lighter power outlet back there as well. So all the hookups if you want back there, and the seats fold down flat too. You have those levers there, and then beneath the floor there you have a couple little storage areas in there, and not a ton of space, but overall, you know, it's a pretty good amount of space here for this class of SUV. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The Alfa Romeo Stelvio has this somewhat bulky key. That's the only thing. If you're, you know, putting it in your jean pockets, it's a little large, but it's still a very nice heavy weight to it. A really high quality feeling key too. And anyway, it's keyless entry and push button start, so you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off in the 2018 Alfa Romeo Stelvio Lusso trim. It's a really nice thing to drive around. I've actually been driving this for about a week now and already put over 180 miles on it. So I already have a lot of experience with it, and it's a really nice thing to drive. Just even for daily driving, kind of normal stuff. It's just so nice. Visibility, though, first off, is pretty good in the Stelvio. Not the best. It has excellent visibility forward. You can see forward very easily. View out of the sides is pretty good as well. You do have this B pillar right next to your line of sight here, but you know, you have blind spot monitoring and stuff, and it isn't bad. It's right in line with most of the other stuff these days. View out of the back is really the most limiting thing, where you have a slender rear window there that's you know, not the greatest to see out of, and those C pillars are also pretty chunky, so when you're in parking lots and things like that, not the best visibility wise. You do have a backup camera, which certainly helps, although the screen on that is a little small as well. It's not a huge view, and there isn't a 360 view or anything like that. And getting up to speed here on a normal road, just cruising. One thing that's really impressive, especially about the Lusso trim here, the Stelvio, is that it is remarkably smooth. The ride is so nice and smooth here. Yeah, just in the normal mode, I mean, you got these 19-inch wheels, but you got some pretty tall sidewalls, 55mm tall there, so it's really a nice, soft ride. Again, you do have pretty good handling too, which I'll get to in a minute here, but just for cruising around, it is a very soft ride, and just in a good way. It's just very comfortable, very refined and luxurious. You know, I would say that it's certainly actually better than a lot of the sportier luxury SUVs out there, and it's, you know, right in line with what you get from a lot of the other luxury competitors in the non-sport segment. But I just like that, you know, this also handles very well in addition to having a soft ride, which is often a hard thing to pull off, especially in an SUV. Otherwise, it's pretty refined in here as well. I know at highway speeds, I did hear a decent amount of wind noise, a little more than I think you would expect out of some of the competitors once again. Another thing worth mentioning is this Harman Kardon sound system is really nice. I haven't heard modern Harman Kardon sound system that sounded bad, but this one really is nice and sharp, especially when you have a wired-in source, especially. Really just very loud and just very crisp, clear audio, and so that's also really nice whenever you're daily driving, just listening to music. It does a really great job with entertaining you as well. Speaking of entertainment though, let's go ahead and put it in dynamic mode, and let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. There we go. Then that CF8 speed just bangs off those shifts. Yeah, this thing's pretty quick. So the Alfa Romeo Stelvio here has the same 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine as the Giulia, and so it does 280 horsepower, 306 pound-feet of torque, which again is identical to the Giulia. Actually has an identical 0 to 60 time as well, 5.4 seconds here for the Stelvio. So even despite the fact this is a little heavier and larger, it's no slower than a Giulia in a straight line, at least 0 to 60 wise. And so it's really peppy though. Like I said, it has the ZF 8-speed automatic, and I love that it has the ZF 8-speed, because even though I don't have these glorious paddle shifters here in the Lusso trim, it's still very intelligent and giving me the power that I want. You have a very narrow power band though here, you know, with this 2-liter turbo motor. The red line is like just over 5,500 RPMs. It's almost diesel low, and so fortunately that CF 8-speed is very intelligently programmed so it keeps you in the meat of the power band, and like I said, it shifts quickly so you never feel like you're waiting for power or you wish you had a wider power band. It's just really punchy at all RPMs, and really, especially when you're in dynamic mode, it keeps it in those higher RPMs so that you always have lots of power right on tap. That dynamic mode also gives you faster throttle response, slightly stiffer steering and brake feel as well. Another thing though, speaking of these brakes, I don't know what it is about these new Alphas, but the brakes are really a little unpredictable in both this and the Giulia. I found the same thing, where coming to a silky smooth stop is actually challenging, because every time I hit the brakes, especially in normal mode, dynamic I think feels a little bit better with its feedback and it's a little more consistent, but in the normal mode you hit the brakes and it's like every time you have to like have a little bit different effort with your brake pedal applications in order to do the same thing, and it seems like it's always like I'm always feeling like, oh, I have to push the brake more and more, and I'm like, it's always leaving me uncertain as to how much brake pressure I actually need to use, but that's mostly in normal mode. Here in dynamic it's a little more predictable, like I said. It's just an interesting thing to note nonetheless. Anyway though, we have a little bit of drizzling, the roads are a little bit wet, so I can't push it too much. We are in an SUV after all, but we're going around some corners here, see how this thing handles. and it does handle very good. It likes to get sideways a little bit, which you wouldn't expect out of an SUV that's all-wheel drive. You know, all the Stelvios here in the States are all-wheel drive as standard, yeah, it does a pretty good job. These brakes, another thing about them, they're Brembos actually, standard Brembos as my camera gear goes flying. They're 4-piston Brembos, they're not enormous or anything, but the fact you get Brembo brakes standard is really cool. But anyway, so handling is really good. You have 235 wide Continental cross-contact tires. Like I said, you have these very tall sidewalls on them in typical SUV fashion. So because of that, that is the only limiting factor. But otherwise, this thing really is so neutral. That's 50-50 weight distribution here. So perfectly balanced chassis for an SUV. It's like really uncommon. It's just so sharp. You have a 12-to-1 steering ratio as well. So really quick steering. Not quite as quick as the Giulia. I think that's 11.8-to-1. This 12.1 is a little bit slower, but it's still way quicker than any other SUV as far as you know, your steering inputs make you feel it's very responsive and alive and just eager to just dart into corners. And so you get a little bit of lean right off the bat from those tires, but then it kind of nicely settles in, and then it just uses that back end to kind of bring you around. It does a really good job of just getting this thing through the corner really aggressively. It takes a little bit of heart and a little bit of guts to really push it through, because you're like, I'm sitting up high, I'm in this SUV, can I do this? And you get the little bit of wiggle from those tires, which makes you doubt yourself as well. But then, you know, like I said, it settles in, and if you commit, it will take care of you with this all-wheel drive system, which is actually a really cool all-wheel drive system, by the way. It usually puts 100% of the power to the rear wheels, especially in dynamic mode here, you know, whenever it deems fit, but it can put up to 60% to the front wheels whenever it needs it. So it's constantly working to, you know, give you the best performance and the best, you know, whether it's for bad weather or it's for, you know, any kind of sporty driving, it will, you know, serve it up. So you can basically, this thing will go full rear wheel drive whenever you're really getting on it and, you know, wanting it to. And I actually, like I said, I got it, the back end out a couple of times, which I wasn't expecting actually, and it took me by surprise, but it was awesome. And again, yeah, that back end. Yeah, it really loves dancing around. It's fun. This thing, so that's the thing. Unfortunately, I'm behind traffic, so I gotta go slow now. But this thing is so good on a back road, and it's so much more fun than any of the other standard SUVs out there. That's the thing, you know, this is priced to compete with just your normal run-of-the-mill BMW X3, Mercedes GLC, all those types, Audi Q5, and this is way more fun than any of those. I mean, I haven't reviewed any of those, but I have driven them just short distances and stuff, so maybe I need a little more experience with those to really make that call definitively. But I mean, this thing handles so well, and compared to any other SUV in this segment that I've driven, that it's not a performance SUV, this handles better hands down. It actually gives some of the performance ones a run for their money. You know, I think a lot of them have a more aggressive tire setup, like the GLC 43 that I reviewed a couple of months ago, you know, and the Audi SQ5. Those all, you know, feel a little bit more aggressively set up so that you do have more grip, whereas grip is, I think, the limiting factor you don't have as much of here with the Stelvio because of the tires. But if you were to do the Stelvio with the Sport package and the 20-inch wheels, so you have less of a sidewall on those tires, I think this would probably give you 85 to 90% of the Giulia experience. And that just blew my mind with how good the handling was. And you have that same DNA here in the Stelvio, just you're sitting up a little bit higher. You have about 300 pounds more weight than you do in the Giulia. These weigh, by the way, to be exact, 4,044 pounds. And so, yeah, but only about, like I said, about around 300 pounds heavier than a Giulia all-wheel drive, which isn't bad. And so it really does a really good job for what it is. If you can't jump up to the more expensive performance SUVs that easily ring up 60 grand, you know, this thing, at its price of right around 50, you save a ton of money. You still have plenty of power. This will outrun, by the way, all those other standard SUVs. The GLC, the X3, Q5, they're all way slower. None of them can do a 5.4 second 0 to 60. None of them even have as much horsepower or torque as this. So it has them all beat as far as specs go. And I think that again, this is the The Alfa Romeo Stelvio is the enthusiast SUV. All the other ones, you know, are great for those that want to go to get their groceries and stuff, but if you actually enjoy driving, the Stelvio is far more fun to drive. And again, you don't have the highest interior quality, but if you care about interior qualities, you can go buy one of the others that doesn't drive as nice. But if you want something that is fun to drive and interior quality materials isn't the #1 thing on your priority list, then this is definitely, I think, has the edge over all of those others. You know, anything else that's 50 grand in the luxury SUV segment, again, this is the most fun I've had in one of those for sure. Another acceleration. This thing, it flies. It really does. You look down the speedometer, you're like, man, this thing picks up speed quick. I think just how quickly it shifts, it kind of disguises the speed, so you don't realize that it gets up to speed just as quick as it does. But man, I love driving this thing. After now, like I said, driving it about a week, I have really fallen in love with it. Like, if I'm not super into SUVs, but if I wanted to have an SUV and, you know, you couldn't go for one of those crazy performance ones, this would probably be at the top of my list. That's how much I enjoy it. It is like so impressive. A few other things to note about it here though. It's not the greatest as far as fuel economy goes. In my week of driving of about 190 miles here, which is actually a pretty even split of city and highway driving. I think I maybe have done a little bit more city than highway, but it's pretty close. But anyway, my average was 19.4 miles per gallon. And obviously I drive a little more spiritedly, but a lot of it was just relaxed driving. So I'm actually a little disappointed in the fuel economy because these are rated at 22 in the city and then 28 on the highway for a combined average of 24. I got nowhere near that combined average. I was hoping to at least make the city number, even with a 50-50 driving split and, you know, a good amount of highway time, but I didn't get that number. So again, 19.4 isn't awful for an SUV. You know, that's one of the sacrifices you make with SUVs is, you know, less fuel economy. In addition to, you know, just this thing being so quick, it also sounds good too. That's one thing I didn't mention yet, is it has a really nice little growl to it that just it's actually a little bit intoxicating. It's not a ton of exhaust note, it's really just more induction noise. Listen to that. It's just, I don't know. I mean, again, it's just a 4-cylinder. It's nothing mind-blowingly good, but I actually really like the little growl you get from it. So yeah, that's another nice little perk about it. The last thing that I want to mention is the price here of this Stelvio, which I mentioned a little bit briefly here. These started right around $46,500 here in the Lusso trim. You can get one in the low 40s without the TI. This is the TI Lusso to be exact. You can go for the non-TI version. You get a more base interior with a smaller screen, things like that, and those are low 40s anyway. But like I said, this TI Lusso starts at 46.5. This one as tested is 54, so it's got a bunch of other options. You know, panoramic sunroof, you know, all this safety tech, which alone is like $2 grand, and I would do without unless you really love adaptive cruise control, because I don't like, you know, it did give me one false alert whenever I was coming up and someone is turning off of a road, but they're out of my way and I'm continuing to go. The car always thinks, oh no, you're gonna rear end them. It's like, nope, they're going away, nothing to worry about. So I still am not in love with these automatic braking and warning systems, so I would save that $2,000 easily. But you know, I've configured one, you know, it's in the high 40s. It still has a lot of really great stuff, has the sport trim, and is a really fun enthusiast package, you know, for an SUV for, you know, under $50,000 or right around there. And you get a lot of great standard stuff too. Heated seats, heated steering wheel are all standard with the TI trim, and so you get a lot of stuff that a lot of the other luxury car companies would, you know, make you pay extra for all that stuff. And this is just bundled right into the mid-level, you know, the TI trim, which is really nice that they don't, you know, make you go a la carte for every little thing. But it's just really fun to hustle around. Like I said, it's just so eager. It just always wants to go, 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 especially in dynamic mode here. And yeah, it's just really an awesome thing. And I think especially if you did one with the sport package, then it would just be superb. But as it sits, even in Lusso trim, it's an absolute blast. I mean, the only little thing over the course of the week here is this thing loves to beep. It has so many warning beeps. You know, when you close the tailgate, it beeps. Whenever you get in the car, it immediately starts beeping. If you don't have your seatbelt on and you start it up. And all the beeps, you know, a lot of other cars have beeps, but they're not quite as loud or as annoying. This one has really loud and annoying beeps. And like, I was driving around my wife and my sister just the other day, and both of them were like, man, this thing's like getting on our nerves. It beeps so much. So just a little minor, you know, complaint there, but otherwise, like I said, this is really nitpicking because this thing is just fantastic. Alfa Romeo could have just gone and made some, you know, boring, blasé SUV, and it would have still probably sold really well. But the fact that they went and made it an enthusiast SUV, I really have to take my hat off to them. Huge respect to them for going with something fun and sporty and putting in the extra effort to really make it special, because everything is really, this really does feel special and stand out from the rest of the SUVs out there. So anyway, huge thanks once again to Alfa Romeo for providing me with this Stelvio to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on the Stelvio in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.